Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Christian Dryden. He's from the band The Ritualists. He's the lead singer and the bass player. And well, because he is a bass player, well, we did talk about that, but we talked about who inspired us to play bass, which is John Taylor of Duran Duran. And we also talk about some of their songs, meaning the Ritualist songs, which if you haven't checked them out yet, you need to because, well, the song The Wake is one of those things that can turn into an earworm and you'll hear it all day long. And we talk about, well, cooking and several other things. So tune in. Hi, Christian. How are you doing today?
Hello, how are you?
I am good. I am very good. Um, yeah, your music. I was just introduced to your music, and all I can say is it's great. It's phenomenal. It has all these, I yes, the press release says Duran Duran, and but here's the thing. There's certain things that I also heard a little Gene Loves Jezebel and a little Cult, and so it wasn't just Duran. It was a whole mixture of '80s, and anybody that really and normally I don't kiss up to my guest right off the bat, but here I am. Um, but anybody that's into the '80s, that nostalgia feel, and it's not that you're a nostalgia band because this is all new. I definitely would recommend it. In fact, The Wake was stuck in my head most of the day.
Well, thank you for that.
You're
I'm
welcome.
happy to hear that.
You're welcome.
And you're definitely touching on a lot of the influences.
Yeah, I mean, when you sit there and listen to it, you can hear it's not just in the write up. Yes, Duran was mentioned, and I know Simon has played your stuff, but there's just so much more than that. There's just every song has a different flavor to it. I mean, The Wake really has that. I will say the very first intro notes reminded me of New Religion when it first started.
Okay.
And
All
then
right.
we went into a mall. It was the never ending story. It had that whole feel. And I talked to him recently, but it was just kind of like, oh wow, okay. So yeah, it was just like a wild ride. So
Very cool.
and yes, speaking of the Duran thing, you in the press release, you talk about John Taylor being one of your biggest influences, and that I will say that shows up in your bass playing.
Well, again, thank you, and you're definitely very much of our world with the things you're describing and saying. You're speaking our language, as they say. And I've gotten more and more as the albums have sort of progressed, and I've progressed as a player, more and more appreciative of what John Taylor did as a bassist with Duran Duran, and how difficult those lines are to play, but how rewarding it is to hear it when you really sort of find that sort of sweet spot with the bass and the keyboard interactions, which is what we really, really try to do on this record.
And it's a very hard thing. Off air, I had mentioned that yes, I had met him before, and I was talking to him one day. We were sitting in the hotel lobby talking about bass playing. And this was back in 1995, so this is before he even came out and said he had a solo record. I have no knowledge that he's working on a solo record. And he's like, well, let
Mhm.
me give you the best advice. I'm like, what? And I'm going to tell you, you've already mastered it. I'm like, what is that? He goes, the best thing you can do is play and sing. That's the best thing you can do. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was what he said at the time. Now, I don't know that he would say that nowadays, but at the time, he was just adamant as anything that the best thing you can do is play and sing. So you've accomplished
Wow.
that.
Donna, you've just made my day.
I'm glad. I'm glad. I mean, and the sad thing is at the time, yes, I still admired his playing, but I wasn't really picking up my bass. I own my bass still. I haven't played it in years, except when like 2020 to prove to my late husband that I could play, but I haven't played. But my biggest influences as a bass player was John Taylor and Gary Beers of NXS. I mean, those were the
Oh,
two for me that were just with a couple
those
other.
are good ones. And you are a bassist as well. That's very cool. Do you have a bass you prefer to play? Like, what kind of bass do you have?
I have a Yamaha BB300. It was just a pick. Okay. The whole deal was I used to go to the record store in high school, or not record store, music store in high school, and I'd be like, I really want to be in a band. I really want to do this. And they had the
Mhm.
the Rickenbacker, and I played around with that. The guys at the record store or the music store let me play with keyboards, everything. And right after graduation, they had gotten a Yamaha, and somebody broke the neck off of it, so they couldn't really sell it properly because it didn't have all the markings. So they're like, we put a plate on the back of it. You know, you'll have to put some engraving on it to that way it's serial numbers on it and everything. But
Mhm.
we can sell it to you for like $300. Okay.
Cool.
So I got my leather case, I got everything. And a couple of years later, I went back in there and the guy still remembered me. And he had this Yamaha poster of John Taylor.
Mhm.
And he's like, I have one. It was on the wall. He's like, I have something in the back for you. I'm like, okay. He walks over. He's like, here you go. I'm like, okay. And yeah, I didn't know. I got John to sign in back in 1998. So
That's very
it
cool.
was. It was kind of a full circle moment, but yeah.
Isn't
Well,
it cool when just random acts of kindness
yeah,
like stick out in your brain where there's so many things we forget in life, but I've had similar experiences where somebody will introduce me to something new or whatever and give me something and whether, the actual intrinsic value of the item it really doesn't matter, but it was the experience in receiving it. Like
yeah.
there's an emotional attachment to it. That's very cool.
Oh yeah. And I still have the poster. I
Of
mean,
course, of
of
course.
course, because it's one of those things where it's like it was a limited edition and it can't be replaced. So when you were learning how to play bass, and I know you like Duran. What would you say was one of the hardest songs that you sat there and said, "Okay, I'm going to learn how to play this song." And it's not the easiest song because his bass playing was never something you just go, "Okay, I can just do something." No. So what was like your pinnacle songs that you had to learn how to play?
For me, it was Rio.
Yes.
The Rio bass line. I mean, I know plenty of working bassists who can't play that bass line, and I know many bass players who think they're playing it correctly and really aren't.
Hmm.
Um, and I picked it up during the pandemic when John Taylor was doing those.
Teaches
The-
Stone Cold
yeah,
Bass
those
Odyssey.
Yes, those were really cool, and we had a lot of free time. And I said, okay, I'm going to just dive in, and I'm going to try to really wrap my brain around this bass line. And the techniques on that bass line that I learned directly from John Taylor's, his video, I use on one of the songs on the new record, and I'd never tried to use that sort of technique before learning Rio, so it directly owes itself to the Rio bass line. Um,
That was one of those songs. The very first song I learned was Save a Prayer. And even that
oh,
is not an easy song. I mean, it's easy
yeah.
in comparison, but and then I learned
Is
new
that a
reli
fretless? Is that a fretless on there?
It could be. I mean, I believe it is. He's played it on upright fretless. I've seen him play it live on an upright
Dude.
fretless.
Hmm.
But most of the time it's fretted. But yeah,
Okay.
it sounds better if it's fretless, but because trust
Right.
me, I know. And then I learned New Religion. Have you ever played New Religion?
I have not.
New
Is that
Religion,
one?
for you, it's not going to be a complicated bass line, but when you're learning, it's right up
Hmm.
there with Rio.
Okay, I'll check it out. I'll check out the bass line. I love the song. I've
Mhm.
never really delved into the bass line.
The live version of the song, I think, is better than the studio version.
The arena off
Hmm.
arena.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll check
yeah.
that out. I'll check
Um,
out the.
but yeah, Rio for me, I had to learn the bass line, and then I had to learn the solo.
Yes,
And
yes, that's cool. That part is great. It's genius.
I remember being in a bar and this guy, he had a Kabiki factor. He wanted to be John Taylor. This was like 1990, 1989. And so I was talking to him like, so can you play the solo in Rio? He's like, no. He's like, why can you? And I'm like, yeah. He takes the bass off and hands it to me and goes, here you go. I'm like, okay. So yeah, I played it, but it's just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, it's when you look at the bass playing, it's like that was one thing. There's many bassists out there, but for skill, he has a lot of different runs and arpeggios and just syncopations. So
Yes. Yeah, I mean the concepts behind the lines. If we want to talk about the greatest technical bassist, I'm sure it's some jazz guy somewhere, you know, but for me, it's about the melodic nature
mhm,
of his lines and the grooves he's creating and the textures. And in that respect, he's really, really good, really great.
mhm. And even if you look back at his influence, which was Bernard Edwards, that was one of his bigger influences.
Mhm.
Same thing applies. I mean, you can see where each person learns, and that's something that you've even taken his stuff and you're making it your own. which is it's a great accomplishment.
Thank you very much. That means a lot, especially coming from a fellow bass player.
I would be, but I mean, like I said, I think I played 2 gigs in my whole career, and that was just kind of like, I'd rather write about being a rock musician than be one.
Well, there you go. You found your niche.
Well, I think that's the thing. You have to come from your place of passion. Obviously, I mean,
Mhm.
yes, I loved playing. I enjoyed it, but being with other people doing it, it wasn't what I needed to do.
Right. I get that.
But for you, this is a passion, obviously.
Absolutely. Yes, for
So,
sure.
so what made you decide? Who came up with the idea for the Wake video?
Well, the Wake video, I think, was the natural sort of offshoot from the concept for the song. Because when I wrote the song for me harkened back to I've said this a few times in other interviews, but I'll say it again, like young adult sort of dark fantasy, which those were all the rage, I guess, in the 80s. Never Ending Story, Dark Crystal.
Labyrinth.
I mean, even Disney did it with an animated, The Black Cauldron, and you know lyrically the song is about that, and I think young adult dark fantasy touches on that. Like when you're a kid and something bad happens at school, it's almost like it's the end, it's the absolute end of the world in that moment, and then 3 hours later you're home with your friends and you're playing baseball or something in your backyard, and all is forgotten.
Hmm.
And the resiliency of children, I think it's actually evolutionary. Like it's like a coping mechanism we've developed as human beings. But I think dark fantasy kind of touches on that because I mean these movies, if you go back and watch them, they're terrifying. There are terrifying moments. I mean, when that horse dies in the Never-Ending Story, like it still brings tears to my to my eyes. Um, so the Wake, the lyrics were about sort of remembering that and saying to myself, well, I hope I'm able to do that as an adult, or at least acknowledge that there are people capable of doing that, and sort of honoring these people who've overcome great obstacles. Um, and that's why I had proposed to Hypnodoll, who is a great local artist based out of Brooklyn. She does a lot of visual art stuff and great editing. That we do something that touches on those themes and was really fantastical and sort of fun, but still had a darkness and an eeriness to it. And that's, I think, sort of how the video came together. And she came up with concepts of like spirit animals and kind of really embracing like these sort of animal personalities for the different extras in the video. And that's sort of how it all came together.
When you're talking about dark movies, do you remember the movie Legend?
I own the DVD for Legend, yes.
Because
That's another fantastic example.
Tim
Ridley
Cur-
Scott.
Tim Curry as the devil.
Oh, he's terrifying in
Hmm.
it.
Hmm. And then of course you have Brian Ferry doing the theme song for that movie too. But yeah, that was just one of those movies for me when you're talking about dark movies. Legend still, even though Tom Cruise is in it, because I know a lot of people like Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise plays a prince, which yeah, you're not really thinking that one's going to go well. But Tim Curry, just yeah,
He's
he's.
great in everything.
Hmm.
And it's just funny again watching those movies now and thinking this somebody created this and thought, oh, kids are going to love it. And a lot of kids did, I guess, but it's still, I mean, it's dark, it's deep, it's heavy stuff.
Being a kid of the 70s, because I was born in the late 60s, being a kid of the 70s, that was kind of the thing. Parents like to terrorize their children. So I think that just carried on in the 80s. There was a fishing trip my grandfather used to trawl in New Orleans, and we were off on this boat, and we're not even, it's not one of those big boats, but it's a trawling boat. And
Hmm.
there's a crab. My dad takes the crab and shoves it at me. I'm like 6. I'm going over the side of the boat before somebody grabs me because I was terrified. But it's fun for the parent.
Well, I guess so. I guess that's part of it too.
I don't think we have that kind of things with kids nowadays, but back then, yeah, let's terrorize our children.
Yeah, I think the whole pop culture thing has become much more contrived in this modern age. I mean, the artists, the top 40 pop artists, it's just so pre-planned and robotic, and there's no danger. I just think it's just it's so controlled
Hmm.
and it's so corporatized and that's really a shame because even though it's pop art, it's still art
Hmm.
and we've lost a lot of that.
Which, you're talking about robots, and yes, I'm going to go back to Duran because there's you being a lyricist, you will understand this. So you know the song Union of the Snake. You've heard the song
Yep.
Union of the Snake.
We're,
There's a video in Arena with in this video, because Arena is just this really absurd movie they made. There's these two metal robots making out. Okay,
mhm.
fair enough, whatever. Before that came out, somebody asked Simon what the lyrics meant. And Simon said, Union of the Snake is about the meeting of two minds. Really? Really? So, as a lyricist, it's always open for the person to interpret. But when you listen to that song, do you think it's about meaning of minds?
Absolutely not.
I just figured as a person that liked Duran, you might get a kick out of that.
Yeah, yeah, very cute of Simon to say something like that.
So, why did you decide to pursue music? Truthfully, why did you decide one day that I'm going to pick up? I know you started out as a drummer because I did overhear that on a podcast I kind of glanced at. That you started out
Okay.
as a drummer and you didn't want to be a singing drummer, but what made you decide I want to pick up the drums and play?
Um, I would say I know this is going to sound really sort of pompous, but I don't think I had a choice.
Okay.
It was just sort of inside me since I can remember. I was always really drawn to music, and initially, before I could play a musical instrument, it was the singing.
Okay.
I just actually it was I have older sisters and my one sister Tracy's boyfriend he played the drums and he let me sit down behind the drum set one day and I just sort of had a little bit of a knack for it, I guess. And it was a great way for me to sort of break into this idea of performing. And I put the singing by the wayside. The idea, I guess that was me trying to be realistic as a kid. Like, oh, being the lead singer is so hard. I'm just going to be the rock star drummer. That'll be easily doable. Um, so I think that's sort of the way my musical journey began in terms of being in bands. But the singing was the first thing I was always doing. I was always singing along with songs as a kid.
But well, you're sitting there saying, "Well, I don't want to be the singing drummer," but Phil Collins made a career out of it for the most part. Granted, he did
He
get
did.
behind, he did go forward eventually, but
He did. And Phil Collins is great. For me as well, though, I was writing songs, and it was very hard for me in the situations where I was in to try to convey my song ideas from behind the drum set. And some songs I've written from behind, like parts of Broken Bleeding were written on the drum set. But I find it much easier to present my songs to other musicians on the bass. And that's why I picked the bass. The bass is still rhythmic, but I can create notes and sort of outline chords.
yes. But if anybody ever asks you to perform on the bass, and they're not fully aware of the song, they're going to be like, "What the hell is that?" You know this. I'm sure you know this. Mr. Taylor even
Awesome.
said that, and I had that same experience because I took watched the same tutorial because I hadn't played Rio in years, and I played it for my husband, and he's like, "What the hell is that?" You wouldn't have known. You would have known. He, not a
Right.
clue. Not a clue. So it's like for people that are familiar with the bass, it's very easy to transition. When you're in a band, it's easy to transition. But the general public, if they at least you can sing still, because otherwise they're going to look at you. What is that? I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true, especially with certain bass lines. Rio is very divergent from the main impetus, like the chords
Mhm.
and the vocal melody is so different from the bass line in that particular song. But you're right. Yeah, most people don't think of the bass line when they think of the the musical section of the song. The bass
But
line isn't the first thing that comes to mind.
unless you're a bass player, because come on, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like once I started playing, that is now the first thing that always stands out to me is the bass line. That's
For
it's
sure. Or unless it's under pressure,
true,
which
true,
everyone,
true, true.
which everyone does.
Right. But I mean, in general, it's like if the bass line stands out, then I'll pay more attention. If it doesn't, then it's kind of like I sometimes it'll just be background noise, the music.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true.
So, what do you hope to come with this next record or with this record release? I mean, I know, are you looking to tour with it like extensively, or you just, I know you have some dates, but are you going to do a bigger tour, or is this just going to be something that's going to be more localized?
Yeah, I mean the band has been doing very well going up and down the coast. We do actually surprisingly well in the South, believe it or not. So we're doing a little tour at the end of April. We're going to play an art gallery where this amazing artist did portraits of each of us, and that's what we're using for our album cover. And he's doing a whole exhibition around it. This is going to be in Wilson, North Carolina, and we'll be performing there, and we'll be performing a few dates around that, Asheville and whatnot. And we will probably go back down south later in the summer and play Nashville, in Athens, Georgia, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. Those are cities we love doing. As far as goals with the record, I would love to partner up with a band and do a more national tour and get to the West Coast. That's always a goal with this stuff, and we're working on that as we speak, and hopefully something pops and we can hop on a tour. But yeah, I'd like to tour the record extensively.
Well, and I mean, there's so many places now that are open. I mean, like here, we opened up a Hard Rock, and they have local acts, they have bigger acts, so there's more doors that are opening now in different places
Very
because,
cool.
and I think that's good because after the lockdown, music kind of died for a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it was very difficult. And both of our first album and our second record were both impacted by that. So um, hopefully things will continue to expand for opportunity wise for musicians.
I had talked to a band that they had just put their record out, just like you're describing, and then lockdown happened. They were had a tour set, and it was like, nope, sorry. And I mean, that has to be really hard for you to put a labor of love and create this, and then it's like, nope, you can't do anything with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with our first record, Painted People. We were on a German label and we were supposed to go over to Europe and do dates. And I would love to have done that, but everything was locked down, and that's why we basically recorded the next record. We just spent our time writing songs and working on new music.
And that was kind of eerie, I'm sure, if you went down to a studio and there was no traffic on the roads. And because I had that experience because the hubby was in dialysis at the time. So, yeah,
Ooh.
driving down the road, it's like, am I in a zombie movie or something? Because there's nobody here.
Yeah. Yeah, our label at the time for the second record was Sweet 484, and they had a beautiful studio in Times Square.
Mm.
So I would drive in to record and track every day with just an engineer behind, glass, in the booth. And I would park my car in the middle of Times Square with all the billboards, hop out of my car, go upstairs. I recorded the drums to that record, the bass, and all of the vocals in the middle of an empty Times Square. It was really surreal.
Wow. I can't even imagine because I mean, for me, it wasn't that big of a place I was going, but for you, that is I think it's Night of the Comet that everything is just gone. That '80s movie from where everything is just gone.
Or have you seen Vanilla Sky? Another
Yes,
Tom
yes.
Cruise reference, but where he gets out of his car and I guess he's having that fantasy or something, and Times Square is completely empty. Crazy.
Vanilla Sky was actually a really good movie. I really did like
I
that
like that
one.
one. I like that one.
I like movies that actually kind of make you think. I don't like movies. I mean, a lot of them are predictable and that's fine, but I like movies that make you think.
Yeah, thinking is good.
And Vanilla Sky was just one of those things where it's like, what? Okay. Um,
Yeah.
so when you, what did, you know both, you know better, excuse me. What made you decide to write that song? What was that all about?
Well, that song, to stay on the topic of bass, actually
Yeah, I know.
started out with a bass line. And I was very excited about this particular bass line. And I've wanted to push the band in a more sort of dancey direction for a few tracks on this record. We were flirting with those ideas on the prior record a little bit. And I think this one is the danciest thing we've ever done. So I brought it in front of the band, and that's how it all started. Was basically around that bass line. Lyrically, this song, it's not about a music critic, but it's about critics of all stripes. And I think critics have been emboldened by the internet, by
Hmm.
Wikipedia. Everyone thinks, oh, if I don't know something, I could just Google it, and that's great. I mean, there's a lot of information available. But what's happening is they're sort of questioning people who've spent their a good portion of their livelihood studying something and testing it out, and they're casting aspersions on expert opinions with their Google opinions, and it's a little bit terrifying. I mean, it's entertaining, and you see it really come to fruition in a horrible way on social media, where you see people write the most ridiculous. I don't know if you have, but I have opinions where you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe someone actually believes this, or are they just trying to get people to sort of react? And that's pretty much what but and I include myself in that. I'm not immune to this sort of knee-jerk reaction to just sort of quickly Google something and think, oh, I know the answer to that right away. But maybe you don't. Maybe you should do a little bit more research, maybe go in a little bit more depth on something so complicated. So I think we all fall victim to it. It's human nature, but that's basically what that song's about.
I have a perfect example. My friend was at work the other day, and her coworkers were saying that her husband couldn't eat eggs because they were dairy.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Dairy. Maybe if it's a Cadbury egg, yeah. But that's a prime example of it. And,
Yeah,
and I think it's
there.
not. Go ahead.
No, I mean the stuff I've seen is crazy, and it's actually to a point where it's offensive and it's controversial. Like I don't even like to repeat some of the
No.
stuff I've seen in there. Yours is sort of an innocuous. That's a good example
Well,
of it. That's
but here's
not
the
offensive.
well, here's the thing. Even for me, I was doing a live podcast
Mhm,
and somebody questioned whether I had a filter on. And I'm like, no, I'm not using a filter. And
mhm.
they are like, well, if you have a ring light, you're using a filter. Now, mind you, the person that is saying this to me, they for their little icon, it's a flag. It's not even them. So they're questioning me for putting myself out there. Wait, it gets better. We get off air. She comes on Facebook and finds me and starts direct messaging me.
Wow.
I'm just like, okay. Yeah. I'm just so I think everybody has become a critic is very true, and I think they've been emboldened to go after people for just stupid stuff, not even the I'm an expert now. No. There's a line in Garden of Allah by Don Henley, and it's, the line is, I'm an expert witness because I say I am.
Right.
And it's
Right.
true. It's very true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's become a big part of our culture, and it's really affecting everything in ways I don't even think we quite understand the ramifications yet. It's almost like it's sort of like that scene in Space Odyssey where the humanoid hominid he touches the obelisk, and then he starts swinging the weapon around, and he doesn't quite understand how to use it.
Hmm.
That's sort of where we're at with the World Wide Web, the internet. I
Hmm.
don't think we sort of understand the effects yet on what they're going to do to our culture. Excuse me.
No, and I think that has also something to do with taking out critical thinking out of schools. Once you've taken critical thinking away, I remember when they said that they weren't going to show Bugs Bunny anymore because kids could not determine what was real and what wasn't real. I watch Bugs Bunny all the time. I knew what was real and what wasn't real. So you're saying kids can't do this now?
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
I remember we had, excuse me, a course in school, and I don't know if they have it anymore. It seems based on some conversations I've had with children that we don't. But they would show us advertising, whether it be print or television advertising, and have us identify what the facts were, what was being presented to us, and what were opinions,
Okay.
and in some cases, complete misrepresentations. And it sort of protects you against media in a way, or teaches you how to arm yourself in terms of dealing with all of this different media. And it was really important. And I think it really helped us in terms of the way we are impacted by these ads that you see, and now even by things you see online. So I think that was a really critically important
Hmm.
lesson that I don't know if it's even stressed today or if anybody's teaching that. I think it was offered to us in an English class, you
Oh,
know.
it seems like a very important class. And, I don't want to go back to Duran, but I am for two things. Firstly, that bass line in that song, that was the one thing I recognized right off the bat that, yes, that was very much his style, that to each their
Sure.
own. But the other thing is when we're talking about media and all this information, you go back to the song Too Much Information. That song was way ahead of its time because now we do have too much information. You're doom
Oh yeah.
scrolling, you're always just being inundated constantly.
It's beyond, and I think it encourages you to just filter things out to the point where now you're trying to have conversations with real live human beings, and your brain goes into this mode where it just sort of tunes things out that might be really important because you're face to face with someone who's trying to communicate with you. So it's doing all kinds of things to us, I think, in the way we communicate, and I don't think we quite understand it yet.
No, and I think it also messes, and I'm not saying ADHD is not real. I'm not saying that. But I think it's
Mhm.
also rewired our brains because our attention spans are gone. Our
Right,
memories are gone. I mean, I used to be able to tell you 20 phone numbers. I can't
right.
tell you anybody's phone number now. It's in my
Yeah,
phone.
everything's saved.
Yeah. So I
The
mean,
robots are doing it for us.
yeah. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but so I think in a way, our brains are being rewired because we've just changed the way we do things.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I agree.
and even like, I was talking to somebody yesterday about the fact that even you guys creating music, you guys don't even have to be in the same room anymore because one person can be over here, one person can be in England, one person, and while that's a blessing, you lose something, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I think separates this new album from the two prior is this album we recorded all together at Clive Davis Studios in Brooklyn, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous studio. It's like an antique studio. And we were all in this big, incredibly beautiful room together, and you can make eye contact and you can feed off one another's energy. And it's not that every take was just a one take, all of us played together at that one moment. That happens, but just the fact that we were all together making this, creating these sounds, I think makes a huge difference, and it's another lost art in modern music. You're absolutely right. I don't think most huge records that are at the top of the charts right now were created that way.
Well, and being in the room together, you get to build on each other. You get to say, you know what? I like that, but can you tweak it this way?
Right.
Where if they're sending you tracks, well, okay, can you go back tomorrow and do this? And then you have that time delay where everything is not it's not coming together synergy wise. It's not coming together energetically. It's kind of just being piecemealed.
Sure.
And there's
Sure. No.
nothing wrong with that, but
Yeah, there's something to be said for the way that the energy works when you're feeding off one another's energy. I think it really affects the way you record and you track your parts. It makes a huge difference.
well, and I think that's also what comes when you look at a band's success. If a band is not gelling, if you're energetically not matched, if you don't, I mean, it's not even about getting along. It's just if you're not vibing with somebody, the music's not going to come because your creativity is going to be blocked in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I mean, two things that people don't talk a lot about with music. One, it is essentially a form of communication. So when I'm writing a song, I'm thinking I'm conveying my art to people. How do I want to convey that? How do we want to present it? How are we going to dress? How am I going to even introduce the song? Every element of the live show is a piece of that artwork. And then in the recorded song, think of it like if you're having a conversation with someone, you want them to understand what you're saying or to get through to them in some way. Now, they don't have to understand every single element of your song, right? A little bit of mystery is good,
Hmm.
but you want to be able for them to take something from it. You don't want it to just sound like gibberish. And I've had these conversations with musicians who are in love with the 30-second note or something, and I'll say to them, that's really incredible you can play that fast. But if you do it every single time, people will start to tune you out because it just sounds like a buzzing bee. Think of the listener. Don't just think of the guitar player in Nebraska that you want to impress with your with your speed and your virtuosity. Think about the song as a whole, think about the listener and think of it as a conversation with someone. So that's number one. I think that is has been lost on a lot of modern musicians. And number two, a band is a relationship like any other. And I've heard it described as a marriage in
Hmm.
some ways. I don't know that it's a marriage, but it is a relationship. And certain people you just don't vibe with. You could find as a guy, I could find the most beautiful woman in the world. I could find her so beautiful. And then we just open our mouths and we try to speak, and it just doesn't work and there's just the energy just doesn't happen. So finding the right guys in the band, it's sort of like that. We could find the guitar player who has all of the right influences and he knows all the chords, as they say. And yet for some reason, when he plugs in and stands next to me, it just doesn't work. And that's why I think bands, especially the old bands where every member had some type of contribution to the whole. The band wouldn't be the same without each and every member. There's something to be said for that. Those are the great bands, the greatest bands. Every single member mattered.
One thing, NXS used to do this. Whenever NXS put a single out, the B side was always a side project. It was either a single by Gary, a single by John, a single by Andrew. There was a dude that Michael Hutchins and their backup singer Jenny Morris. They did a cover of Jackson as one of the B sides. So they
Okay.
always did something on the B side for somebody else to have a part of, something else to show for the band in their own
Right.
style, which was actually a nice thing.
That is very cool. That's very cool.
But nowadays we don't have singles, so
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when I'm writing stuff too with my band, I'm thinking of the way they play and they approach things in the way I'm writing my songs. So they're informing my creative process, whether they're a songwriter or not. I'm thinking, oh, David on guitar I know he would put a lick like right here. This is the spot for it, or Jeffrey would lay down this pad here. So I think um, the organic bands that all have a personality and each member has a style. Those are the most interesting to listen to.
hmm and the one other thing I wanted to talk about when you were saying about the 30-second note, if you continue to play the same songs over and over again, granted, your following's going to be there, sure. You'll have a following and then they're going to get bored, especially nowadays. So
Right.
the fact that your music, because I did go back and listen to your back catalog as well, the fact that you have evolved as a musician, as a singer, as a group, that shows that you can continue on and continue to gain fans. I've talked recently to a lot of people that have been in the business 30, 40 years. And
Mhm.
one of the things they've talked about is the fact that there is a maturity to their songwriting now that they didn't have when they were younger. And so if you continue to write and you continue to create, your songs are going to evolve. The one, when I talk about, I've talked about this band a couple of times. The Outfield had three songs on the radio, and I can't tell you the difference between any of them because to me, They all sounded alike. Now, my sound guy loves the outfield, and we've had
Okay.
conversations about this, but to me, they all sounded alike. And it's just like,
Right.
okay. But as a musician, if you can evolve and every record sounds a little different, you're going to gain fans. You may lose some, but the people that really like your stuff are going to be there.
Yeah, I think that you know, if you're, you know, you're standing still too long, you're sort of dead in the industry. And I think you have to keep moving and moving forward and experimenting and trying new things. I think there is like a stylistic vein throughout all of this stuff where you can hear it's the same songwriter at least,
Hmm.
but it's definitely in a place where you can hear I'm intentionally experimenting with new sounds, with new rhythms, with new tempos. That's another thing too, tempos. Like I'll go to see some bands and every single song is, you know, it's either the same drony tempo. And I love drony stuff. And we'll have like our slow, completely, you know, theatrical drony moment, but also you want to get people moving as well at a show. And then you'll have the other extreme where you'll just have the band that's just hitting you with the 2 minute ultra fast songs for 45 minutes straight, and it just becomes like completely exhausting. So I love a band that can play at different tempos and different feels. I think that's important.
Well, like when I learned radio, when I became an on-air personality, I was taught, okay, here's this list, and you're going to pick out up tempo, low tempo, top 40, whatever. You had it all
Mhm.
broken down. You had to, granted, I got to pick the songs, but I had a format to follow. And I think
Right.
with a band, yeah, I don't want to go see a band that's going to be like high energy for 45 minutes because that's a lot to take. And one thing that I
Mhm.
don't think a lot of people realize is that when you're seeing a show, you're feeding off the energy of those people on stage just as much as the band is feeding off of you. So, and you're feeding off all the energy around you. And so that can be a bit much.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, let it breathe. We've had, you know, Mario McNulty, our producer on this last record, he would say that a lot. Let's let the song breathe a little bit here. You know, lay back a little bit on this part, or amp up over here, and have a little bit of push and pull, even within the song itself. And I think that's really important because again, if you're thinking about it as communication, it would be sort of like having a conversation with someone who never takes a breath and speaks at 100 miles per hour. That's not enjoyable. And again, you might tune it out within a few minutes or for some maybe a few seconds. So when you think about it that way, that that's sort of our philosophy about things in terms of our music.
So besides music, what do you like to do?
What do I like to do besides music? Well, I like to read. I'm a big history buff. I particularly like the classics. I love classical Greek stuff. I dabble. I can read a little bit of ancient Greek.
Hmm.
Um, I love the English Romance poets. I love Oscar Wilde. So I do read a lot, and I draw inspiration for my song lyrics from that. I like to play tennis to keep in shape. So it's a lot of fun. It's a good for the mind too. It's something totally different from what I normally do, and it's kind of like a good respite from things. So I also like to cook. I post a lot on my Facebook and Instagram of the dishes that I come up with, and I've had a few fans contact me. They're like, "You should do a glam rock cooking show where you get all dressed up in like your stage garb and sing and cook your dishes."
Why not? It's a way to get followers. I mean,
Sure.
there's a person that Ray represents that has a cooking show. And he's kind of leaving
I
music
didn't.
now because he's doing cooking.
That's hilarious. Okay, I need to investigate further.
Yes.
Noted. Noted.
So what kind of recipes do you come up with?
Well, I am partially Italian,
Okay.
so I started out really trying to perfect like a good red sauce. I do it from scratch. I start with, you know, I can't believe we're talking about this, but um, carrots, celery, and onions, and I will like cook them slow and low for a
Okay.
very, very long time and create somewhat of a roux with olive oil. And then I'll add my fresh garlic in there and my spices, and then I'll put the tomato sauce, and then I'll decide whether I'm going to do like a fish sauce
Okay.
or a meat sauce or just a regular a plain marinara. So I started there, and then I got into making my own meatballs, and I'll do like game meats like bison meatballs or lamb meatballs, and I'll sort of modify the sauce. I'll do the sauce if I'm doing lamb meatballs. I'll do it with like mint, have a little bit of a Mediterranean flavor and a little bit less tomato sauce, a little bit heavier on the oil and garlic and onions. So that's somewhat. I also do some like barbecue. I slow cook ribs and all that kind of fun stuff. So it was good. And again, this was a result of the pandemic.
Of
You know,
course.
you're home, you have all this free time, and it's like let me just get more into cooking. You look up recipes online, and cooking's so fun because you can be so creative,
Oh yeah.
and the possibilities are limitless. And you try something and you taste it and you know like, okay, next time I do this, I'm going to add a little bit more of this, or I'm going to swap this ingredient out. And I find it to be a lot of fun, and it's very relaxing.
Hmm. Have you tried a Kamado tomato? It is a chocolate tomato.
I have not, but I've seen those in the store.
One day we had a produce
Should I try?
market and they had a bunch on clearance. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just grab a bunch. And I put them in the
Okay.
Vitamix and I made a chocolate tomato sauce,
A
meat sauce rather.
chocolate.
Yeah, it was a chocolate tomato because it's got this hint of chocolate to it. Now, also, usually when I cook with red sauce for lowering acid, I'll use a chocolate bar in it, whether I'm making chili or whatever. Because you put
Interesting.
a chocolate bar in it. My husband taught me this. You put a chocolate bar in it, it cuts the acidity.
Interesting. I will have to try that. So almost like a mole, like a Mexican
Yeah.
mole.
But it's not
Yeah.
really a mole because it's not overpowering. It kind of just
Hmm.
blends in, but it just comes. So with the kamada, what happens is your tomato sauce kind of becomes sweeter. It gives us the
Hmm.
sweet. It wraps around to the sweetness.
Okay.
Yes,
I
we
have to
have
I have to check it out. You've now inspired me.
good.
Um, I also have been doing, and this again, this is back to music, but it's sort of an outlier. Inspired by John's sort of bass tutorials, I've started doing something I call the skeleton bass series,
Okay,
where I play bass and I sing,
nice.
and I basically explain to my audience, and I have a few young members of the Painted People clan who are like eager to learn my bass lines. So I sort of show people how I came up with the bass line and how it works along with the vocal. So I've done about three of those, and I like to keep doing those, and they're a lot of fun. I'm not a trained musician. I've never had lessons. I couldn't tell you about scales.
Guess what? John wasn't either.
That's awesome. Well, you would never think that.
No.
Um, the other guys in my band are very. I mean, Jeffrey is trained classical pianist, and David has a background in jazz music, and Eric has been taking drum lessons forever, and he can read and sight read and all that stuff. But I'm not trained, and I always find it funny because the untrained guy is showing all of these like well-trained players. These are the chords, guys. You know.
Look, when I started, I lucked into being a disc jockey, I had my friend show me how to work everything. But so when I get
Mhm.
hired on Tuesday, my boss is like, okay, you're going to start Friday night, midnight. Okay, fine. And the guy is there, you're going to have a jock in the booth with you the whole time. All right. So I show up for my midnight shift. I'm on air. I do, I think, three breaks, three segues, maybe
Mhm.
30 minutes I'm there. And the guy's like, oh, you're better trained than most of the people that went to school for this. So you're on your own.
There you go.
So yeah, sometimes you don't have to have the knowledge that you think you need. But that doesn't mean what we were talking about earlier is invalid about the expert because there's certain things that you need to go with an expert.
Oh
Music may
yeah, I
not be one
mean,
of them.
yeah, no, I mean Jeffrey and David are always calling me out like, "Oh, that note doesn't work in this key or that." They'll guide me through, and I love having them, and I've actually learned a lot from them. So your point is well taken. Absolutely, it's great to have people on board actually know what the heck they're doing, you know?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
and this is going to sound pretentious, but I think for rock and roll music in particular, you're sort of playing with it. It's like that's like the yin and yang of rock and roll. You want that sort of Dionysian, chaotic, wild, organic, natural, and oh, this is just coming out of my soul. But then at the same time, you also want that sort of, I actually sort of understand how to do music, and this isn't something that just anyone could get up here and do. So you want to have both of those bases covered with your rock band, I think.
Hmm. Speaking of
The Apollo
Dionysus,
and the Dionysus, the
which
control and the chaos.
the picture behind you,
That would be Dionysus.
I
But I have
know.
a bust of Apollo that I'm staring at over there. So
Oh,
um, so we have them both covered here.
you're very balanced.
Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe. I have my moments.
Look, we all have our moments. And, I don't want to go, I'm not going to go political, but I want to say this much. Knowing your background with history and everything,
Hmm.
you kind of have to really, goes back to what you were saying about how do people come up with stuff? Because if you're well read and you understand history, you have to go, why are we in this shit show we are? But that's,
Well, actually, having studied history, I am not surprised
no, I know.
that we are in this. It's actually like sort of
Repeating.
normal.
Yeah.
It's cyclical. It's
Hmm.
people think, we're getting better everybody wants to believe that. Oh, I'm getting better every day. Not really. There's a cycle to things,
Every
you
80
know?
years, every 80
Yeah.
years, I read that was every 80 years we fall into this cycle.
It's very even with democracies don't usually last that long.
Mm-mm.
Democracy, they historically speaking, you're going to get the dictatorship. It's going to come, and then you're going to get, it's going to be tight control over everything. Then you get complete anarchy, and then you get democracy, and and the cycle just repeats itself.
If
A lot of philosophers who are much smarter than I have said this. So
did you ever watch Rocky and Bullwinkle the cartoon?
I have not.
Okay.
I know who they are, but I've
At
not
the
watched it.
very end, they would have this music, and it'd be like da 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 da, and it's just this lovely little tune. But as the ending's coming, the lights that are behind them are just exploding, like everything's
Mhm.
falling apart. And then there's this little guy cleaning up after it, and that's kind of where we're at right now, because we had all the bright lights, and now everything just
Yeah, and if you think about it, the internet and COVID sort of created an atmosphere of anarchy.
mm-hmm,
Our cities were on fire, and
mm-hmm,
all this craziness was going on, and certain segments of the population have gravitated towards like a really totalitarianistic sort of it's almost they want to be controlled.
mm-hmm.
And that's human history. I mean, that's totally typical
Yeah.
for the way we do things. And the first people that the dictators always kill, who do they kill? They kill the intellectuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, and why do they do that? Because somebody who's read something or studied something is going to put that. It's like, hey, I don't really think that's a good idea. They tried this back in the 1938, and things
Mm-hmm.
didn't go so well. Um, but
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like I know, and even if you want to get to the esoteric, if you look at astrology, Pluto has
mhm,
moved into Aquarius. Pluto is in the same place where the Civil War happened, where the Revolutionary War happened. So once again,
interesting.
cycles.
Yeah, yeah, and we would be foolish not to recognize that. It's foolish people think it's always getting better. Certain things are getting better. Medicine certainly has gotten better. Science has improved because that's the nature of science. But other things, politics, politically speaking, and the way we control one another, that's sort of like ingrained in our DNA. And it's very hard to break from that. And I certainly don't think we have.
No. And when you think about the fact that, yes, medicine has gotten better, but then we put somebody in charge of it that has not a clue. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
But I'm sure we'll have someone who'll watch this and will be, go on Google and they'll tell me or you how that's actually nothing that we've said is true, and that lizard people are living at the center of the earth and they're controlling everything, because they found an article online that says that,
yeah,
you know.
I'm very frank about having cancer and stuff, and I'm going to chemo tomorrow. My dad sends me this message the other day. He's like,
I'm so
"Yeah,
sorry.
it's okay." He's like, "Yeah, before you do this, I want you to go check out ivermectin and some other thing that it helps cure cancer, and you won't have to go through this." And I'm just like, "Dad, we're talking about my life. I'd rather take
Oh,
my chances this way than go for some." He's like, "I'm sorry I brought it up," and I'm just thinking, I appreciate that you
yeah.
care, but because
Yeah,
that's the
no,
go ahead.
yeah, and his heart could be his heart's in the right place, right? But because of the way information, you're just being slammed with information. It's so easy the easy way out is to just go Google. It's
Hmm.
much more difficult to spend years and years in medical school
Oh yeah.
or to pick up like an 800-page book and
Hmm.
finish it from start to finish and then tell me what you're thinking. um, and I'm sorry about the cancer. Like many members of my family have been impacted by cancer, and I performed at a few cancer benefits locally in New York whenever I can. So I'm sorry.
No. It's been I moved last year and I was like, okay, this is gonna be a great year. Everything's gonna go well. And yeah, I got diagnosed. I had surgery and I start chemo tomorrow. And I told Ray that, and I told my audience that hair or no hair, I'm gonna be here because this is one thing that keeps me going. And if I give this up, so yeah, I'm sure I'll get called an alien or whatever. Because yeah, the guy tells me yesterday, even your nose hair can fall out. I'm just like, what? What?
Well, someone I'm very close to went through chemotherapy, and you don't have to do this, but she bought a badass wig that looked amazing if that's your thing, but you don't need to do that. And it'll pass. You'll get through it. You'll have your good days and your bad days, but she was able to function. She only missed a few days of work with it. So I think you'll absolutely be able to do this, and you'll flourish, and you'll be fine. In terms of I don't know what type of cancer you have, but in terms of chemotherapy, I've seen people get through it, and you can definitely get through it.
I had endometrial cancer or uterine cancer,
Okay.
depending on how you want to call it. But it's one of
Right.
those cancers, as I've talked about. It's like when a woman deals with breast cancer, everybody knows that because it's a very public thing. My type of
Mhm.
cancer, nobody knows. And
Right.
I recently had a friend who had cancer, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to lose my appetite. That means I can lose weight. No, I had a friend who actually got a wasting disease afterwards, and she just
Oh,
passed from that. So it's like I understand now why certain things you have to pay attention, and that's not what we came to talk about. None,
right. No,
but
that's okay.
yeah, I think, like I said, I highly recommend your music, and I think that you have a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and I know I sound like I'm sucking up, but I think that you have a bright future. And if you've already gotten noticed by people in the industry, it's just a
Thank
matter
you.
of you keep putting yourself out there. And if you have to do something silly, like a cooking show, so be
Right.
it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it wouldn't be silly for me. It would be fun. It would be work,
Hmm.
because I'd have to think about this stuff. But I think it would be fun. Yeah, something to think about.
And think about the segue you could put in there between, pulling the dish out of the oven or whatever. You could put little breaks in there with a little bass playing, a little funky bass playing.
But yeah, there you go. That would be cool.
Just saying. So, is
Yeah.
there anything that we did not talk about that you would like to add?
I mean, you are the interviewer, so I'm happy to go in the directions where you take me. If there's anything you think we haven't covered, I'm glad you like the record. I hope other people out there listen to it. It's called Too Pure to Cure. Our latest single is out. It's called The Wake, and it's available on just about every platform. We will have vinyl for this record that gets released on April 22nd, and I hope everyone checks it out.
and be warned that the wake may get stuck in your head. And that's okay because you need a song to get stuck in your head.
That's the idea. That's the goal.
Well, thank you, Christian.
Thank you very much, Sally. Yeah.
Too Pure to Cure is the record, and you better go listen to it, get a copy of it. And if you get a chance to check The Ritualist out, definitely go do that. For me, yeah, they're not coming anywhere near me, and this is going to be the summer of isolation again for me because, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do much except do this. And yeah, we talked about my cancer a little bit, and that's okay. It's something that I've been very public about. But I think one thing that we have to look at in the bigger picture here is when I do this podcast, it's about you getting to know the people for who they are, whether it be their views, their values, their what they like doing. I mean, come on, we talked about cooking. And for those who are interested, one chocolate bar you can use, and that will cut the acidity. For me, I use chocolate chips, and then you can flavor it up the way you want to. If you want a little bit more chocolate in your sauce, then, it changes the flavor. But and I think Christian should start his own cooking show because I think it would garner some more views and I think it would be fun. I think, imagine it'd be a real fun time. But when you look at the music from To Pure to Cure, I want to say The Wake is the video is a whimsical thing. So you should go check it out on YouTube. And like I said, I listened to, I think, the album twice because I got an advanced copy. And it's like stepping back into the 80s, but not as, oh, look, it's this record. No. It's a little bit of psychedelic furs, it's a little bit of the cult, it's a little bit of Duran, it's a little bit of Gene Loves Jezebel. And we shook it up in a mixture and laid it all out for you. So I think it's a trip to the past and I think it's an adventure and one that you should probably embrace. Because especially if you're a bass player, he has some great lines in it, and there's some danceable music, and then there's some music that is a little moody, but that fits with the broodiness of the gothic. So I definitely say check them out. As far as the other things about history, it's true. We don't really look at history. We don't really, the whole adage of history repeats itself. It's true, but we never pay attention to it, and we should. And it's very important that we should, and we have to understand that, yes, we are here where we are. And as he said, this is that part of history where we're at. And we'll swing away, we'll have anarchy, and we'll swing the other way and see where it goes. But then you got to wonder, why did I sign up for this ride? Well, you're here because you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to go through this, whatever karmic lesson, if you believe in this. And that's kind of how I believe in past life reincarnation. I'm not going to go really deep into that, but I signed up for this ride. And it's going to be a doozy, but it is what it is. And I'll continue to be here and I'll continue to tape as much as I can as long as I'm allowed because that's part of who I am. It's about being authentic. And to go back to Christian, I think he's being his authentic self. And you have to know who you are and you have to understand who you are and be authentic. Don't let somebody on the internet try to tell you that you're not authentic and you're not who you are and that you don't know anything. Now, make sure you educate yourself though. Don't look at the internet and say, "Oh, this is it," cuz eggs or dairy. It's like my grandmother. When she moved up here after Katrina, she told me that she had to have skim milk. And we didn't have skim milk up here. We had fat free. And she's like, I can't have fat free. I'm like, grandmother, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Yes, it is. And I pulled it up on the internet. I went to the Dairy Council, the United States Dairy Council Society. And I showed her that it said fat free and skim. And she still argued with me and said it wasn't the same. Understand that sometimes when you have knowledge, people are not going to believe you because they want to believe what they want to believe. And I know my dad was coming from a good place, and I know he loves me. Yes, I know that's weird for me to say. I know he loves me and he was coming from a good place, but yeah, I'm not gonna go off of something that was on the internet that there is no trials and no proof of when I'm dealing with my life. So, yeah. So I think, if you can trust yourself to see, as he was saying, what is propaganda and opinion and what is the truth. Make sure you vet things. Make sure you take the time to read things and not just go, okay, everything's fine. Know what you need to know. And the one thing you need to know is you need to go check out The Ritualist because they're pretty awesome. And Christian, I enjoyed interviewing him. So, on that note, I'd like to thank Rich Side from Third Ear Audio for the sound. I'd like to thank Fast Susie for the opening and closing music. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in, no matter evening, morning, noon, or night, whenever you're listening. I really, really do appreciate it. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.